In this video, we're going to take a look at steel wire armoured glands, something we've worked with in the workshop, as well as in the installation theory element of your exams. And it can be as simple as identifying one of the elements of the glands. Now, we're going to look at, first of all, a BW gland. BW means it's inside or in a dry environment. Then we'll look at CW glands, which are designed to be in a damp environment or outside, and look at the subtle differences between the two in order that we can identify all of the elements. So the gland I've got in front of me here is BW20, and you can have things like BW20S, BW25, BW40, and it's all about the diameter of the gland. So if we get it out of the packet, so this is a BW, so an inside gland, and it's 20. So as we get them out, every packet that you open has two of everything. So in other words, so we can make off both ends of a steel wire armoured cable. So let's have a look at what we've got. We've got two shrouds, okay, within our packet. We'll move these to one side because they're often called the wrong name. So while I move them out of the way, think what you might call these in college settings. So I'll move those out of the way. And then we've got this here. So we've got our gland nut. So I'm going to wind that one off. And then we've got our gland body. So if I separate off the lock nut as well. So we've got that part here. So we've got our gland nut, our gland body, and you notice this knurling or roughed area here, and that's the bit that the armouring sticks into or gets trapped between when we're making it off. And these are all made of brass. So we've got a brass gland nut, gland body. We've got a lock nut, of course it's 20 mil because this body here is also 20 mil. And when we say BW20, we're talking about the diameter of the actual gland itself. So there we have a 20. So if we were knocking a hole out of a box, if we bring a box in here, we'd need to knock out a hole that also is 20, 25, 40, or whatever we need to take out compared to my gland. When you see 20S, exactly the same. So the gland itself is a 20 mil diameter, but the body itself is a lot smaller. So it's got a smaller body, and we'll look at cable conductor sizes in a minute. And then we've got this here. We've got our lock nut. It could be a lock ring. So we've got a lock nut, 20 mil lock nut. And have you thought about what this might be called? It certainly isn't called a banjo. It is not a musical instrument. I cannot play any songs on that. For your exam purposes, that will be known as an earthing ring, and again, made of brass. On site, I totally understand they're going to call it a banjo, and I did for the entire time I was there, but the exam won't. The exam will call that an earthing ring. So we've got two shrouds. We're going to have two gland nuts, two gland bodies, two lock nuts, and two earthing rings within a pack for our steel wire armoured gland if it's a BW, an inside style of gland. The packs themselves have a chart on them more often than not, talking about, first of all, the cross-sectional area of the conductors. So we're talking as small as 1.5 millimetres squared, all the way down on this pack to 400. We could go all the way up to 1,000. So that's our cross-sectional area of our conductors. And across the top here, we have the number of conductors within the cable. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 10, etc. Now, we're likely to be working in college maybe with a 2 or 3 core cable. And let's imagine it was 2.5 mil, and it's 3 core. Hopefully we can see that it says 20S. So we'd want for an inside gland, it'd be BW20 and S. And as I just said earlier, all it means is the actual gland body is slightly smaller than this BW20 to accommodate that style of cable. So that's our BW gland. So if I move that out of the way, we've got another one here that I've opened up again. It's got two of everything in it. So if we pull these out, and this is one that we'd use for an environment that would be damp or outside. And as I look at the packet here, it gives me an IP rating of IP66. And you notice now it's a 20S. So the hole in which I need to knock out into a box will be 20, and the gland is a 20 mil diameter, but it's the S, so that means small. This is the one we'd call a CW gland, used for a damp environment. So exactly the same as we've seen before. We come with two shrouds. We already know that these are not banjos, they're earthing rings. And let's look at breaking down what we've got here. So as I open this one up, this is our sealing nut. And you can just see in there, hopefully, a little black seal that will need to seal around the cable. So that's our sealing nut. We've got a gland body now, as we had before. So we've got a gland body. Unscrew that, and remember there's two of everything in each pack. So that's our sealing nut, gland body. They go together, and you notice something drop out there. This is different now. We've got this here. We've got, again, they're all in brass. This is our compression ring. And that goes onto our gland body. And again, we've got a locking nut. But you notice now that we've got a smooth area around here where with the knurling before. So what happens there is this ring, this brass ring, traps our armour in onto our gland body. So it's probably easier for me to show you that with this one here. So again, this is a CW gland semi onto a steel wire armoured cable. We've got our sealing nut with our plastic seal inside there to seal against the outside PVC to prevent the ingress of moisture. We've got a gland body that when we push it up, will push our brass ring onto our steel wire armoured. So as I push that one forward, we can see that that would then be locked off onto our gland body. And then when we pull them together, okay, we tighten that one off. We bring up our nut here. So our sealing nut comes up. And if I just pull it to the side, you can see now, once we tighten it up, hopefully the PVC in there will seal around. So when we looked in there, we saw that black PVC sealing would seal against the outside of the cable to maintain its IP rating. So that's our CW gland. Often at colleges, you tend to make off the BW variety that we looked at first, but as you move into industry and you start working in environments that are damp, you're going to be using a different style of gland. You're still going to need to put a shroud on it, so it will still have its appropriate shroud on it, in order that we can finish off that steel wire armoured end. Now it might be, you're really fortunate, you level up once again. So in the college you're likely to be working with a BW 20S gland. You might use the CW ones if you're ever stretching exercise. But then when we get onto site, you might have a purpose-built gland for outside environments. Okay, so if you look here, this gland here has an IP rating of IP68. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at this style of gland. So when I get this one out, it'll reiterate another point that we need when we do glands for outside use. So again, two 20mm lock nuts. Okay, so we're happy with those. Two earthing rings. Okay, come in those. And no shrouds in this set. Okay, but what we have got is this gland body made up very similar to the CW gland we just saw. So we've got effectively our sealing nut, and you see in there again, there is a seal in there, a little O-ring in there as a seal. Okay. Then we've got our gland body, very similar to what we saw, but obviously these are not brass. The brass gland is held within there. And again, we've got a compression ring and our gland body. So similar to what we just saw in a CW gland, but obviously it's a slightly different design for those. Now these are great. Obviously in college, these are quite, let's say the word, yeah, they're quite expensive for a college to be using. And obviously as they're plastic, and again, when you're using a pair of grips or spanners on them, it can damage the PVC. Remember, a gland's probably only ever going to be installed once in its life, whereas at college, you're taking them in and out. The important bit here is because it wants to be IP rated, you notice we have another O-ring or another seal here, actually, as it goes into our enclosure. So that needs to be there and sealed. So imagine that was going into a box, obviously, and clamped in there. The seal would need to be in place in order to keep that IP rating. So if we go back to our CW gland, there would need to be a seal here that would need to be added by the electrician. And that's often forgotten. Obviously, we've sealed it here. We've gone into our enclosure, but between the enclosure and the gland body, as we have here, you'd need some sort of O-ring seal in order to maintain that IP rating. And again, it might be if you're using a box outside, obviously this is a insulated box. Okay, in order to go in there, you notice the holes are pre-punched into it as well. In our college setting, we tend to use either galvanized or black enamel boxes inside. And then we're thinking about maintaining the protective conductor. So we're going to bring the CPC off the armouring. So this armouring within the cable needs to be connected to the protective conductor. So if we open this one back out, at one end, if you're not using it as a CPC, so you could be not using this as a CPC, and we'll look at that in another video, but if you are using the steel wire armoured as a CPC, it's obviously going to earth to the gland body, and that's where our earthing ring can bring through the protective conductor into our enclosure. And we've seen that in a previous video where we made off steel wire armoured. So the armouring needs to be maintained if we're going to use it as our CPC. If we're not going to use it as CPC and we're going to use one of the cores, which is also fine, because this is electrical and metal, it is an exposed conductive part and it will need earthing from at least one end. So you can't get away with not earthing our steel wire armoured because it is an exposed conductive part. So there we have it. We've broke down and looked at a BW gland, a CW gland and a specialist outside gland and looked at some of those key components. An exam question could be as simple as identifying this. And we know the answer is not a banjo, it's an earthing ring or any other elements within the actual gland itself. However, as we look over here, you might notice these cables and how we would interface these and what type of insulating material they are and properties of the steel wire armoured. In order to find out that, check out the video on the screen over there.